Folks, it's Thursday, which means it's time once again for another episode/issue, I almost said issue then, of the best movie podcast ever. The only movie podcast that is nothing but objective and hyperbole-free discussion of every movie in the known universe. I am your host, as always, the podcaster with no name, Konrad, and with me once again, he will drink your milkshake, it's Anthony James.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Lovely. There he is. This is going to be a movie diary for us this week. So to briefly explain to you what that's going to be, we're going to talk about all the movies we have watched since the last time we did one of these, which, as we explained last week, means that this week we will be talking about every movie we've ever seen. So strap in.
I've got a long list here. Not holding it up. I can't. It's too heavy. I can't lift it. But
yeah, can't even lift it. Like it's probably. I'm trying to go for a charitable estimate. It's probably about like 2,000 pages long. I reckon, our combined list of all the movies we've ever seen. So yeah, lucky you, listener.
Yeah, lucky you. Yeah.
Before we get into that, please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, both on YouTube and on podcasting apps. Shoot us a like and a rating; those help tremendously. Engage in the comments section. Tell people what you think about the episode and share it with your friends. Get the people talking. This is the hottest.
It helps a lot.
It does. It helps massively. We won't grow without people like you. Yes, you, listener, telling that other people to listen to the best movie podcast ever. That's simply what this is. But the people don't know about it yet. We need to get them on board. But without further ado, let's talk about some movies.
Yeah, I'm up for it. Let's go.
Okay, let's go. Right. In we go, a seamless transition into the main body of the episode. So how many movies have you got to talk about today, Anthony?
I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6. 5 or 6.
Okay.
And the reason why it's 5 or 6 will become evident later on, because
nice.
two of them come as a package.
Yeah. Okay. Well, similarly to that, I have 5 or 8, depending on whether we want to discuss a certain trilogy.
5 or 7, wouldn't it be?
Yes. Yeah. You're right. 5 or 7. Listen, I'm not a maths guy. Yeah. All right. I never claimed to be. I'm a man of the art.
I was crunching the numbers there, Konrad, and it wasn't adding up.
Okay, well, I say what we do then is that this seems to pan out quite nicely for us. If you take us through 2 of yours, and then we'll do 2 of mine, and then 2 of yours, and then 2 of mine, and we'll round it out with 1 each, and then we'll see where the night takes us.
Yeah, well, that's it's only 11:42 a.m. We'll see where it goes. We could be here.
Stop giving the listeners a peek behind the curtain. It's nighttime.
Yeah, it's nighttime.
We're in our smoking jackets. We're pouring liquid honey in the listeners' ears.
And I'm sure the keen-eyed listeners have noticed by looking at the length of the episode, we are not going to be talking about every movie we've ever seen. We just name them. Yeah, it's just
The Prestige, Batman Begins, like Godfather Part 2. We'll just do
Flight
that.
of the Navigator. We'll name them all. So we're not going to be doing that, but we're going to go through just the films we've seen in the last week or so. It's a movie diary. I've been told my whole life that I should keep a diary. We're finally doing it. We're finally doing it. In video form.
And this isn't, maybe these are movies that you want to go and see. Maybe they're movies you've already seen. Let us know either way. It's just a casual chat.
Yeah, and there was a few people in the comments last week said that they wanted to go and see The Last Black Man in San Francisco based on my recommendation. So I'm really happy I'm looking forward to hear what they think of that film. I thought it was a great film. So if there's anything you want to go and see based on what we talk about today, go ahead.
Yep. Or if you want to tell us that our taste is awful, also, I'm prepared to accept that as a valid criticism.
Yeah, and also before I go on as well, I will say, if this is the first episode you're listening to, you didn't listen to our one last week, both Konrad and I have a very wide taste in movies. So Don't expect us just to be talking about like the ones up for Oscars, or don't expect us to be talking about just Chris Nolan films. We're going to talk about everything all the time. So having said that, I will start with an Oscar-worthy film for my first one. So my first film I watched the other night, I think it was Boxing Night I watched it, and it's Apollo 13.
Lovely. I think I have seen this, but I don't remember. Oh, I mean, obviously I know about it because it's based on something which the government tells us actually happened. But please don't read too much into that.
We are not conspiracy theorists.
I remember literally nothing about this movie.
Well, you remember it's in space.
Wait, what?
Yeah. So basically, the setup for the film is that it follows a character called Jim Lovell, it's a true story, right?
Yeah.
And Jim Lovell was an astronaut at the time who'd spent the most time in space. He got that record on Apollo 13. And he basically missed... He was in one of the original missions that went up. I think it was Apollo 8. Went up and went around the moon. They didn't get to set foot on the moon. And it was always his dream to go up and step foot on the moon. And you could sort of feel that he felt a bit of jealousy towards like Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin whenever they were able to do it. And he wanted to get on as soon as possible. He was going to be on Apollo 14, but they were the backup crew. And then someone in the main crew got sick, so then they had to take the place of that crew. And basically, it follows the story of them going out into space. And if you didn't know, the thing that everyone knows about Apollo 13 is that stuff goes down, and they wouldn't have made a movie.
We have a problem.
Houston, we have a problem. Exactly. So basically, actually, first bit of trivia about that is apparently in real life, he didn't say Houston, we have a problem. He said, Houston, we had a problem. And Ron Howard, the director, didn't like using that exact phrase because it sounded like the problem was in the past.
Yeah.
So he changed it to have a problem.
Do you think, this is a bit of an aside, but do you think there is a more famous line uttered by a human than Houston, we have a problem? Even if he didn't actually say it.
Do you think that's more famous than One Small Step for Man, One Giant Leap for
I think they're both up there. I reckon Houston, we have a problem might be more famous because it's used so often, whereas One Small Step for Mankind, I feel like is treated maybe with a bit more reverence, like it's not repeated as often.
Yeah, I think you might. Yeah, Houston, we have a problem.
We should do an episode on that. Like, we should do a themed episode on like the real life lines spoken by people that became, some of the most iconic bits of dialogue in human history. Because I reckon Houston, we have a problem might be up there.
Yeah, and also like the thing about Houston, we have a problem, or Houston, we had a problem. It is actually. It was like what he said in that moment. Whereas the Neil Armstrong one Small Step for Man, One Giant Leap for Mankind, that was very much put together by focus groups.
He prepped it. He prepped it.
He prepped that. This is what I think I'm going to say. So this one was much more.
They vetoed America. Fuck yeah! As he jumps out of the. As he jumps out of the lunar lander.
If Trey Parker and Matt Stone had their way, that's what it would have been. America, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, I'm going to give a spoiler for this film. So I'm going to warn the listeners of a spoiler here. I think most people know the story of Apollo 13, right? So spoiler alert. You skip forward a minute or two to get past this if you don't want to hear a spoiler in this film. Okay? When I saw this as a child. I haven't seen this since I was probably I was born in 91. This came out in 95. So I probably haven't seen this since I was at most 9 or 10, right? I, for some reason, now again, spoiler. I'm sorry, spoiler. I thought the whole time that they were going to die.
Okay.
The whole time, which doesn't really add up when you think about the fact that it was based on a book from the actual Jim Lovell, writing about it.
But he was writing it as he was traveling.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that as a 9 or 10-year-old boy. And so the whole time, and my wife was the same. Like, we were watching it thinking they were going to die. And to be honest with you, it made for an amazing emotional response that I had at the end of the film.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because when they were coming through the atmosphere and burning up, there was a whole question about the heat shields, would they hold? And the most time that any spacecraft had ever been in blackout from the communications going through the atmosphere was 3 minutes. And they got to 3 minutes, and then they got to 4 minutes, and I'm like, well, this is how it goes. Pretty sad ending to the film. And then all of a sudden, it's like, Houston, this is Apollo, and I'm like, oh my god, they're alive. And I properly had a real well-up moment because I wasn't expecting that the whole time.
Yeah, they made it. Like that's the emotional crescendo of the whole movie.
Yeah. Oh god.
I remember it still working. To be honest, the only thing I remember about this movie is there's two things I remember about this movie. One is that Gary Sinise is in it, who he felt like a very similar character to Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, from what I recall. That might be just me completely misremembering his character.
Well. Yeah, maybe, but maybe
so that's a no. That's a no. Then.
Maybe you'll notice it. Well, see, Lieutenant Dan was a real down and out, like he needed to be inspired to,
Yeah.
Whereas Gary Sinise in this film, his character was very much like a Ken Mattingly, you call him. He was very much a go-getter, and he was very much like a perfectionist, So he's kind of like the opposite character. Although he kind of is what Lieutenant Dan turns into in.
I think that's where I made the connection between them. Like he's like sort of an early version of an early or a later version of Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah.
And not the middle part where he's a disabled Vietnam veteran who hates everything.
But the interesting about this is that Tom Hanks got cast as Jim Lovell, and then Gary Sinise went. The producers and Ron Howard went to Gary Sinise and basically said, "Right, Gary, you can have any other role you want. Which one do you want?" And he chose Ken Mattingly, who is the character who basically he gets shunted from the mission because he's never had the measles before. And a member of some other team got the measles, so therefore they couldn't risk him getting the measles in outer space. So he got shunted, and he had to stay. But he was really integral to them making it back. To be honest with you, so he chose that role. He says that he chose it because Ken Mattingly, he's like, oh my god, if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't have got back. And I'm like, you chose it because you didn't have to do all the zero gravity stuff, didn't you, Gary?
I think I don't know this for a fact, but I wonder if this movie inspired in Tom Hanks an interest in outer space, because about 3 years after this he did a very good miniseries called From Earth to the Moon, which is effectively the same thing. It's a series about the Gemini and the Apollo programs at Cape Canaveral, which follows all these characters in a little bit more detail. And I wonder if that was because of Apollo 13 that he moved on to do that.
Well, I think Tom Hanks. No, apparently he was a history buff in terms of the Apollo missions before he got this. Tom Hanks seems to be a history buff in all regards. Like he's a big war buff, war history buff, and he's also
big fan of typewriters as well.
Loves a typewriter.
Loves a typewriter.
He's apparently short story writer. He's a man of many talents and many interests.
He is,
appears in Borat 2. So plenty to say about him.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, that's his career high point. I did watch Borat 2 again. That's not on my list for this week, but I did watch it again.
I still haven't watched that. I need to get around to it. I saw a Lindsay Ellis video talking about it, which made me a bit more enthusiastic for watching it. But I need to be in the right mood for cringe out comedy.
Yeah, Konrad, that's the thing. You are that person we talk about. You need to see a YouTube video to get permission to like something.
Yeah. I need to be told what my opinion is before I see something. Otherwise, I simply can't form one. And unfortunately. I've seen Lindsay Ellis tell me that thing is good now.
Whereas that Lindsay Ellis video meant so much more to me, because I was like, oh, okay, I actually get a pat on the back for this one, because my take was exactly the same as hers. Whereas you're like, thanks, Lindsay, I'll go watch it and like it now.
Spoon feeding me my opinion. Anyway, we're going on to the next movie now. That's enough of that bit.
Okay, you want another one from me then?
Yeah. Hit me with your
Borat 2. No, I'm just kidding. My next movie. We won't spend too long here, because I don't think you've seen this film, and it's more of a nostalgia hit for me. But I noticed as I was browsing through Amazon Prime, they had The Great Outdoors on there, starring John Candy and Dan Aykroyd.
Okay.
And I remember watching that film so much as a child. It came out in 1888, and it's basically a story.
1888.
Yeah, 1888. That's how old it is.
Yeah. You got dark on the mind. Dark on the brain.
Dark on the brain, yeah. Yeah, so 1988, obviously. But it came out, so that's 3 years before I was born. So this was a big film in my childhood. It's basically a film from years gone by that they don't really do too many of these days. It's I was having this conversation with Ema. It's like a genre of just a holiday film, where the families go on a holiday, and the bad guys aren't really bad guys. They're just like a dickhead who's nearby,
Yeah.
And I just love this film. They go out to a cabin in the woods. They get into a ruckus with a bear. They go jet skiing. Oh no, what do you call the thing where you hold on to the back of the boat on a big rope?
Oh, wakeboarding. Wakeboarding?
It's like skiing, water skiing.
Yeah, I guess water skiing.
Yeah, water skiing. So John Candy goes water skiing. It's absolutely hilarious. Goes off a jump and all. It's just a great family comedy. Dan Aykroyd plays a real obnoxious, up himself brother who's really.
Oh, is he like a city slicker?
City slicker. Yeah, and this. I'm going to talk about it later on, but this sort of ties in well to one of my other films that I've watched. But basically, it's about, like, at the start of the film, John Candy's family very much feel inadequate compared to Dan Aykroyd's family, and they're like very city slicker, very, very rich. And, you know, as the film progresses, you sort of find out that happy family of the rich family is just a veneer, and actually it's not going as great as they thought it would, and actually the heart of John Candy's family becomes sort of the emotional weight, and it also sort of brings the brothers together at the end as well. And Dan Aykroyd becomes a little less arrogant, not fully, but a little less. But
lesson is learned.
Yeah, but basically, like, you know, this film to me, it's one of those random ones from my childhood that I completely forgot about. And then when I saw it on Amazon Prime, I was like, okay, I got to watch that again. And, you know, IMDb says a 6.7 out of 10. This type of film is the type of film where I think you can't rate it at all. It's just like, did it work for you? Did it not? You know what I mean?
I think, I come to like these kind of movies. So I very recently, it's not on my list, but I very recently watched National Lampoon's Vacation for the first time. And I thought it was funny. I did think it was funny. But I think I never had any of that interaction with this kind of like Second City Chicago comedy group of, you know, like Dan Aykroyd, John Candy, John Belushi, Chevy Chase, like all those guys who were like on SNL in the 80s and 90s. I never really had that much exposure to them when I was a kid, apart from, I guess, like Blues Brothers and Spaceballs, I think were the only ones I saw, but I never saw any of those movies, so I don't have any nostalgia for them. But I do still think they're good movies though, but I don't hold like the reverence for John Candy that maybe you do because you were watching so much of his stuff when you were a kid.
Yeah, like Uncle Buck, for example, is...
I've never seen Uncle Buck, no.
Yeah, so... Unbelievable. Yeah, like, I do have that sort of reverence for that. But, yeah, like, I think you appreciate it as well. Like, would you agree with me that these days, like, there are a few of films in this style, but I don't really see many, like, in terms of, like, just going on a holiday or a road trip with your family. Yeah. Those films aren't really put in the limelight like they maybe would have been back then.
I think there's,
Where the Millers is one, I suppose.
I'm trying to think. There was a Kumail Nanjiani movie that came out very recently, and I cannot remember what it was called, but it was really funny. That was on Netflix, and that had... I think the problem with a lot of modern comedies is they don't actually have like jokes in them. So the plot needs to elevate the characters into farcical situations so that they can do like the kind of improv comedy that makes up like 80% of all comedy movies these days. It means that these kind of, like, I mean, this is kind of, I assume The Great Outdoors has a lot of like farcical comedy, physical comedy, but I think you struggle to get this now because what am I trying to say? I guess it just feels like you need like something like The Hangover. I know that's like a 10-year-old movie at this point, so it's probably not that relevant. But I felt like that was the high watermark for a certain kind of comedy that I never really got that on board with, and it's very like starkly different to something like this where it's all snappy delivery of actual jokes with some farcical situations thrown in, but it mainly is the comedy is in the script and in the performance rather than in, oh, look at this funny situation that these characters find themselves in.
Yeah, and look at these 20 different outtakes of different ways they could have said it because it's all improvisation. I think that, definitely, like, when you... in a strange way, an improvisation comedy can feel unoriginal. Even though they're making it up on the spot, the style is very, very unoriginal to me. But The Great Outdoors, definitely worth checking out. I think it's sort of a film of a days gone by, like even the way back in those days, the way the films like this were shot, like they were almost shot like they were on a home video camera with no thought put into the lighting whatsoever. It's just like
the
blanket light the whole thing,
secondary,
blanket light the whole thing, and like it's like even like these days the quality of the cameras and the composition that directors now put into stuff and all. It kind of takes away from this type of film. So even if I watch a film made like last year with the same plot and everything, I know I would prefer this one because I just think that it's almost like it's overthought now these days. You know, not that you could ever really overthink a film, but you know what I mean? Like they'd be putting more thought into it'd be more stylized. Whereas this is very much like, hey, let's go up to a cabin, let's shoot us, you know, making this film. It'll take 5 weeks to do it. Let's have fun. That's how this.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like how Adam Sandler makes movies with his mates now in the Happy Madison stuff. Except these are funny and those aren't.
Yeah, well, yeah. The last 10 years. You know how we feel about Adam Sandler in general from the past. But I will be the first to jump in line and slag off Jack and Jill. Like, let's be honest. Yeah.
Just to briefly go back to it, The Lovebirds is the name of that Kumail Nanjiani movie. It's very funny. It's worth checking out. It's got, I mean, talking about IMDb ratings, it's got a 6.1 on that. I think that's a load of shit. Like, I think it's really funny. So that's on Netflix.
Listen, anything like most genres and most films, you can't really pay attention to someone else's rating on it.
No, especially like no one. See, this is the problem with this is why on my letterbox I don't use half stars, and I try to rate things a long time after I've seen them, because no one knows how to use a 5-star system or
We've
even
talked about this before a little bit, I think. Yeah.
I mean, like, and a 10-point system, even less so. Like, everything is either a 1 or above a 6. Like, like numbers 2 to 5 might as well not exist in a 10-point system because no one ever uses them.
Yeah, it's true. And like, I'll come out of a film and I'll be like, yeah, that was really cool. I really like that film. Yeah. And then my wife and I will talk. We're like, yeah, probably 6 out of 10. And then we go home and we tell people and we say like, oh, we saw a film. They're like, oh, what did you think of it? It was good. Like, we really, really enjoyed it. 6 out of 10. And they're like, what? That means it's terrible. It's like, well, that's 3 out of 5 stars.
Yeah, that's a 3-star rating. Like, it means good.
That's good. It's a good film. Like, yeah. You can't give every film you ever see 4 or 5 stars. Like,
Yeah. Well, you watch me.
Yeah.
My letterbox is just like 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars.
Yeah, you only actually review the ones you like.
Yeah, that is also true. I only watch movies I like for the most part. I try to avoid bad movies, which maybe I should stop doing now that I'm getting in on this YouTube racket. It's all that's where the money is. The money's in dunking on bad shit. So
next week, a special on The Room.
Yeah, finally, the internet gets to have its say on this underappreciated classic. But yeah, that's cool though. I do like those movies. I'm kind of discovering them later in life. So like the National Lampoon's Vacation and the John Candy stuff. But that sounds like a good one.
It is good.
So, okay, I'm gonna start the show on my side with a showstopper. We have joked about this in our promotional material, but to be honest, this is one of I'd say it's probably in my top 20 movies. That is very like high praise, top 20 movies. Like, I think this is his best movie, and that is 2006's The Prestige from Chris Nolan. I think it's his best movie compositionally. I think the story it's telling is really interesting. I think the performances from Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale and Michael Caine are all really strong. And Scarlett Johansson, even though her accent's a bit dodgy, and I can't remember the name of the actress who plays the other romantic interest off the top of my head, but both of them are really good. And it's about magicians just fucking with each other in really dramatic ways that I really enjoy.
Yeah, to be honest with you, this was... I remember, I think the first Chris Nolan film I ever saw was probably Batman Begins. And then when this came out, I was like, okay, you're doing superhero films, but this is fucking unbelievable.
It's about magicians.
Yeah, it's about magicians. I love Christian Bale. Hugh Jackman is my soulmate.
This is like peak Christian Bale, I think, at this point as well. Like there was like after Batman Begins, there was like a 5-year stretch there where Christian Bale was on top of the acting world. And I feel like he's gotten more into kind of character actor territory as he's gotten older, which is not a problem. Like some of his more recent stuff, like Ford versus Ferrari, is very, very good in that. But this was like peak leading man Christian Bale. Yep. He can carry a film with that charisma that he has.
Yeah. He's such an interesting actor. I think I like the fact that Chris Nolan used him again after Batman Begins, because it's in a very different role than Batman Begins, when he played Bruce Wayne. So I like seeing him portray very different characters. I will say as well, in this film, like Scarlett Johansson, I think this is just before she would have, or maybe it's actually in and around the same time where she sort of blew up as like the sexiest woman alive, and every film she was in basically just felt like she was only hired for her looks. And I think that she's not in there at all. I think she's moved past that phase of her career. Unfortunately, that's a phase which a lot of actresses go through. But I think she's past that phase. But I think this film is sort of a standout moment in that era of her career, which is just a top quality performance in film. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think she kind of that kind of started with Lost in Translation, I guess. Was where people were like, "Oh my god, look how sexy she is," and to be honest, her performance in that is really good as well. But yeah, I know what you mean. With Scarlett Johansson, she kind of needed to go and do. I don't know if you've seen it. I might have watched it with you actually, but she went and did a movie called like Under the Skin in 2013.
No, I didn't see that.
Which is a really, really good film, but it's very, very low budget. It's basically about
set in Scotland, isn't it?
Yeah, it's basically about an alien who like
it.
hunts men in Scotland. It's like Species if it was set in Scotland and good. And it's amazing. It's a really, really good film, but it's very, very low budget, very indie, very the way it's presented is really interesting. And the fact that she needed to go and do a movie like that to be taken seriously as an actress, which I think that probably did mark the point where people were like, oh, she actually is a really good actress.
She took her career by the scruff of the neck and she just said, you know what, I'm taking you where I want now. I'm not going to let these men tell me what roles I need to have, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Would you consider this, talk about The Prestige, would you consider this a Christmas movie? I do. It's not really, Christmas isn't really mentioned in it, but there is snow in the Montana section.
Well, alternative Christmas then, maybe.
An
alternative Christmas movie. I've never considered this. I think it maybe comes down to when you watched it for the first time.
Yeah, I for some reason, this is just a movie I watch most Christmases. And the best I can do for justifying that is because there's snow.
Yeah, but like it to be honest with you, like I'd watch this any day of the year. It's so bloody good. Obviously, Michael Caine's in it. We know Chris Nolan has an affinity for Michael Caine.
Yeah,
he's Michael Caine.
I have the right to set it on. He's so good.
The turn. But yeah, it's I don't know. If anyone hasn't seen this film, I'm sure everyone who listens to this podcast has seen at least one Chris Nolan film. At least one. Like,
you've done very well if you managed to avoid watching any Chris Nolan movies.
You've done really well. But this is a film which he did early enough in his career. Like, I think he did Following, then he did Insomnia, which is the only one that he didn't write as well, I think. Because he wanted to have an experience of big budget films before he went into Batman. So he did Insomnia, and then he got Batman, and then he did Prestige. So this is his fourth film.
I had Memento in there somewhere as well.
Oh, sorry, yes. Memento was his second, yes. So Memento is what launched him. So he did Following, then Memento, then Insomnia, then Batman Begins, then Prestige. So by Prestige, he really is into his big budget stuff by that point. And
he's really cooking like creatively before he kind of... I like Chris Nolan, but I do feel like his writing is not his strong point. And it got worse as he went on. But this, he was firing on all cylinders at this point.
I think with Chris Nolan, the issue is that as he goes on through his career, he's starting to take an interest in other parts of the film that aren't just the story. And because he started off as such, in my opinion, in those first few films he made, such a strong writer, I think that he doesn't realize himself that is sort of tailing away now because he's taking interest in the more sort of the IMAX camera. He's taking interest in the more sort of overall film that I think the writing in his later stuff is suffering for it.
Could be.
Having said that, I still, as we'll surely talk about many times in this podcast, I have never seen a Chris Nolan film I didn't like. That is not the same for Konrad, but it is true for me. But yeah, so we'll talk about the future, I'm sure. In my mind, The Prestige is a forgotten one that, to be honest with you, is one of his high points. And
I think you've got Dark Knight, top of the pile, Prestige just underneath it. And I think those two are brilliant movies. I think we joked about Chris Nolan, and we will continue to do so because he's always fun to make fun of, because he's kind of like the film bros' favorite director. But he has really good movies. Yeah, I'll make fun of him for that because I am pretentious. I like Akira Kurosawa. Get fucked. But yeah, he made some great movies. There's no getting around that. And even his bad movies, I think, they still have quality to them. They're not without merit, I think. But yeah, so that's The Prestige. And my second movie, complete tonal shift, is a movie I've never seen before. I don't know if you've seen this actually, but this is... I want to call this a Christmas movie as well, but maybe it's just because it's kind of lovey-dovey and happy. But that's 1999's Notting Hill.
I've seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen anything else that Roger Mitchell directed, but it's Richard Curtis who also wrote Four Weddings, so it's that same kind of thing. Hugh Grant and Julia Roberts are star-crossed lovers whose romance could never possibly work because Julia Roberts is a famous actress whose boyfriend is a douchey Alec Baldwin, as if there's any other kind of Alec Baldwin, and Hugh Grant is a is a bookshop owner in Notting Hill, and there's just no way the romance could work.
Yeah, but we'll see. Like, does it happen? Does it not? Like, it's
will they? Won't they?
It's Horse and Hound. It's just so good. Like,
it's really good. I'm a softie at heart. I love a love story, and this is it's just nice. It's just a nice story. There's some great performances in it. You forget that Hugh Grant at one point was. I know he's kind of typecast.
This is the film that when I think of Hugh Grant, if I was going to watch one Hugh Grant sort of romance comedy, British comedy film, this is the one I'd watch because
Over 4 Weddings.
Yeah. Well, and that's just because of my upbringing. I think my mum liked this one better, so we watched it more. But yeah, like Spike, what a legend. Rhys Ifans as the comic relief is absolutely fantastic. At the end when he's like directing the traffic and all, it's just so good.
There's a lot to love about this movie. I had never got around to watching it because, to be honest, when in 1999 I would have been like 12 going on 13, and I was right smack bang in that sort of awkward teenage period where I was like, romances, I don't care about that, I'm gonna go listen to Limp Bizkit. And then and so unfortunately I missed out on this. I watched Love Actually fairly recently as well, which is definitely a Christmas movie. I was going to say Notting Hill, I guess it kind of feels like a Christmas movie. I don't think there's really anything Christmassy about it, but it's nice to come back to and discover that these movies are actually good and actually hold up.
Yeah, no, it is. It's also from a certain. This is a bit like I know it's about 10 years after that, but it feels to me like an era of like British cinema, which is like sort of akin to that era of the great outdoors we were talking about in American cinema.
Yeah, there was a very specific feel.
This very specific feel to these British romantic comedies. Like you talk about whenever you turn 13, 14 and you're sort of like, Limp Bizkit, romances are terrible. Like I have to admit, like, I don't know if this is like, sings my praises or does the opposite, but I have never really been a part of a group or I've never cared what people think of me. Right, basically.
So yeah, that's a good quality.
Yeah,
I've 100% did.
I've never cared what people think of me. Like I remember when I was like 14, 15, watching Sleepless in Seattle with my brother who was like in the Gaelic football team, and like he's still a big lad, but he'd still sit down and watch Sleepless in Seattle with me. Like, in our family we never really had that feeling of like, oh, that's girl stuff, or which I don't believe in myself, to be honest with you, but or even like, oh, that's for kids, or I know I'm too cool for that. Like, well, I don't know why we just never had that. And I watched Sleepless in Seattle. That's probably my favorite romance film. Sleepless in Seattle. If you haven't seen it, one of Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan.
Again,
Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. Like they had like 4 or 5 films together at one point. Very, very good. But
there's the sparks are flying in the on-screen chemistry between those two.
Yeah, I put it this way: like I'm a foul, just like Hugh Grant in this film. I'll say whoopsie daisies, and I'll the difference between me and Hugh Grant is that I won't try and hide it. I'll say whoopsie daisies, because I want to say whoopsie daisies.
Don't be ashamed of your whoopsie daisies. Like that's what makes you charming.
Exactly. No, but yeah, and Horse and Hound, the magazine.
That was really funny, that entire bit, and it had the guy from Green Wing in it, whose name I can never remember because he has a really long name. But one of the main characters in Green Wing, and he is like great as the kind of slimy journalist who is
Julian Rintut.
That's it. I can never remember that name. But he's very good in that as well.
Yeah, Horse and Hound. Apparently, I'm looking here on IMDb, and apparently Misha Barton was in it as one of the actresses in the space film Helix. She was a 12-year-old. Do you remember Misha Barton from the OC?
Yeah, was she the one who dressed up as... Oh, no, I know exactly the one you're talking about because I watched this with my partner, and she said that was the one from the OC, and I was like, oh my God, she looks so different.
Yeah, Misha Barton, that's her. So that's a great shout. I love that you included
that. Yeah, that's a great callback. I'm glad you remembered that, because that when I was told that while watching it, it blew my goddamn mind. Where's she now? Oh, Misha Barton. What's she up to?
I don't know, like, fuck... OC's working on a sequel. I don't know.
Yeah,
they bring everything back, don't they? I would say
the OG this time.
Yeah. She's probably working. She's probably doing like Scarlett Johansson did and working on very low budget feature films. But
in Scotland,
it's not her choice. That's what I'd imagine.
She'd much rather be working on big blockbusters.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there we go. That's my second one, Notting Hill. Watch it if you haven't already. It's lovely. We're still technically in Christmas time-ish, so I think you can get away with a lovely seasonal rom-com. Well, actually, as we discussed, that's not a seasonal rom-com, but it's still fun. It's still fun.
Christmas is a time of year where even people who have hang-ups about the genre of film they watch, they'll watch a bit of anything. So give it a go.
Right, okay, let's have two more of yours then, please, Anthony.
Right, okay, so the first one I'm going to give you is actually two films, except you'll understand why. So basically, as you mentioned before, National Lampoon's Vacation, you watch it for the first time. Well, the vacation films are something that that sort of Chicago troupe of comedians, I grew up with that. I don't know why. Maybe it's because it was on TV a fair bit in Australia, or maybe it's just because my dad was a big fan. I'm not sure. But basically, I finally got around to watching 2015's remake of Vacation, starring Ed Helms, Christina Applegate, and to be quite honest with you, if I was to give you a one-line summation of this film, it's funnier than it had any right to be.
Okay, glowing.
It was funny. Like the first 20 minutes of this film, I was really hemming and hawing and thinking, this is not good. This is terrible. And I think at the end I would still say it's not good, but it passed the 5-laugh test. Like this, it passed the 5-laugh test. There was some really, really funny moments which I was not expecting. For example, all right, so I'm going to spoil a couple of jokes here for you, but still, there's other ones in the film that we'll get a chuckle out of. Just to show you the type of comedy that it has, which I was not expecting. In the original Vacation, there is a common theme throughout most of the vacation films, that there is an attractive woman who turns Chevy Chase's head. Yeah. A lot of the time while they're driving really fast down a motorway, right? Yeah. So like he looks to the side and like it's like and there's a woman in a red like convertible a blonde woman like sort of giving him the eyes, you know.
Yeah, some 80s rock starts playing as he's looking at her. It's like that seems to be.
And in both films there is the same theme of like they're sitting next to a very beautiful wife, but their head is still turned by this other woman, and they're driving down. Right now in the original, this happens to Chevy Chase 2 or 3 times throughout the film. Yeah. This is what's really funny to me is that in this one, it happens, right? Now I am gonna ruin this joke for you, right? I am gonna ruin it to you. But this you might not watch the film without actually knowing a couple of good jokes in it, right? Because why would you watch this? But basically, they're driving down the road. Ed Helms looks around to the side, and he sees a woman in a red convertible, just like the original, and he's like, "Oh my god, fancy a bit of that." And then he has to like recorrect the car or whatever. He looks away for a second, and the woman gets hit by a lorry, like a full semi truck just smashes into her, right? And then he just looks back and she's gone, and he has no idea where she went. And it's sort of like that. I wasn't expecting that, to be honest with you. I thought they were going to milk that joke the whole time.
It's quite a meta joke.
It's quite a meta joke. There's a few moments of meta. A couple of them I appreciated, a couple of them I didn't. Another joke, which is the other joke I'll tell you, I won't tell you too many jokes. Another one which is really, really good. It shows you how sort of the way that the film was made is a bit unexpected in terms of what you would expect from this. There was a local guy, they're going to like hot springs, and they wanted to skip the line. So they asked this local guy, they say, "Hey, how do you get to the hot springs? But I don't want to wait in this line. Is there a place the locals go, like a back road?" And this guy like gives him like 2 minutes of an explanation of where to go. He's like, "Yeah, you go up that dirt road, right?" But the whole time he's speaking, he's got a rat sitting on his shoulder, right?
Right. And
at the end of this 2-minute thing of him explaining where they go, Ed Helms goes, "Yeah, so thanks very much. What's your pet rat's name?" And the guy's like, "Pet rat? What?" And he's got a rat on his shoulder. He smacks it off. And I was just like, that's good. That's a good joke. So there was at least 5 more of them in the film.
You got your 5 laughs,
which made it worth watching. But I will say, like, the setup for the film is that basically this is Rusty Griswold, who is the son of Clark Griswold from the original.
We're staying with the clan Griswold.
The clan Griswold. So this is Rusty Griswold. Now I will say I didn't. It's a bit shallow to say this, but I was like, but Ed Helms isn't ginger, because Rusty is ginger, right? That's why he's called Rusty. But basically,
it's a recessive gene. Like we don't. Maybe he lost it.
Yeah, he lost it eventually. Like, but I was like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. But but I got over that very quickly. But
good.
Yeah, I got over it. But
that was Anthony Michael Hall. I've just remembered in that original movie, like the guy from The Breakfast Club, and also, which I completely forgotten he was in that movie, despite the fact I saw it like a month ago for the first time. But
yeah, in the original, yeah. So what I did was, after watching this film, I went straight and watched the original, and the original is just much higher quality. I think perhaps they were justified in making this film based on it making me laugh 5 times. I'm glad I didn't go to see it in the cinema. I'll say that. It takes some balls to remake a movie that Harold Ramis directed and John Hughes wrote. To be honest, like if you think your movie is going to be as funny as that, you've got some balls to attempt it. So I'll give them that they were ambitious. Yeah, and I will say as well, like we talked about earlier, about like the idea of like this like improvisational comedy being the thing these days. This wasn't that. They did try and stick to the sort of old fashioned way of making a comedy.
Jokes.
Yeah, like dad jokes. That's what they did stick to. And there's some great dynamics. Like there's a whole thing where they tried. It didn't really sit well with me, this one, but they broke the fourth wall at the start in a bit of a meta way, where like they're talking about like, because they're going to Wally World, which is the same place they went to in the first vacation. And basically, Ed Helms' character Rusty is like saying that this is going to be a way different vacation than the first one, right? Because like, what's different? Like, this is way different. Like, we've got 2 sons. In the first one, there was a boy and a girl. So it's like breaking the fourth wall like that. I didn't really appreciate that, but it's funny. Like 5 minutes before that, I did say to Emer, it's like, interesting. So the only way this film has changed in 30 years is that they've changed the son and daughter to be 2 sons. That's nice. Quite retro. Yeah, that's retrogressive. Like, that's not really bringing it into the 21st century. Like,
no.
But yeah, no. It's worth watching. Now, I will say as well, the directors of this, John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein, they seem to be a director partnership, because they do a few films together. And what I found interesting was, now I've been paying particular attention to this particular production. Because it's a Dungeons and Dragons film coming out into 2022, and the reason I'm paying particular attention to it is because it's actually filming in Belfast. And if we hadn't just had a child, my wife Emma would probably have been working on it. So that would have been interesting. But it is what it is. You can't get on everything. But basically, the reason why I find it interesting is because these 2 directors are actually directing Dungeons and Dragons. Now, before I realized this, in my mind, Dungeons and Dragons was going to be a bit like the Warcraft film was a few years ago, in that it was going to be like just a fantasy.
It's going to be bad. Is what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, we're not going to get into Warcraft, but the editing let it down. Let's just say that. But basically, I think what a strange choice. What a strange choice for that director. David Bowie's son, Duncan Jones. What a strange choice to go do Warcraft next. After doing Source Code, after doing Moon. Oh my God. Okay, we'll not get into it, but that was weird, that choice. Anyway, so basically these two directors are doing D&D. And I thought to myself, that's so strange to me that they're doing that, because I assumed it was going to be like just a fantasy film. Now it makes me think that D&D is going to be like a comedy where like people go into the game like Jumanji style into D&D. And I think that might fit with these directors a bit more. Well,
I mean, the last one had one of the Wayans brothers in it, so there's form for people making shitty Dungeons and Dragons movies that completely miss the, let's be honest, quite dry tone of the Dungeons and Dragons source material, or some of the Dungeons and Dragons source material. But it'll be interesting to see what they do with it. Maybe they'll surprise me. Yeah. We're due a good fantasy film at some point. I'm trying to remember the last one we got. Most of
the good fantasy these days is on TV, isn't it?
Yeah, like the Witcher series is pretty good.
Talking about the stunts in Witcher is really good.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so was that your 2?
That was my 1.
Oh, that was your 1. Okay, go on. Hit me with your next one.
Well, I'm going to hit you with my best shot. And that's going to be, unfortunately, we haven't finished Christmas yet, guys. It's going to be The Muppet Christmas Carol.
Excellent.
Directed by Brian Henson. Brian Henson, of course, Jim Henson's son. Brian Henson, this is actually his first film that he ever directed, which is his directorial debut.
Yep.
Couldn't get better, in my opinion, for a directorial debut. What do you think of The Muppet Christmas Carol?
I think I know this is probably sacrilege to people who have seen some of the older ones, but I think this is the definitive version of A Christmas Carol as a story on film, to be honest. Like, because it still has the heart of the original. It's still, you know, telling the original story, and Michael Caine as Ebenezer Scrooge is grounding everything. But then he's surrounded Michael Caine,
Caine.
I'm trying to think of. He doesn't really have much of an accent in this. Like, he's sort of.
He's got his own, yeah.
Yeah, he's just got like his actual actor accent rather than the sort of fake Cockney he does sometimes. But yeah, I think this is a great movie. I love everything about it, and I watched it myself probably a month ago, like at the beginning of December, when I started doing my Odyssey of Christmas films.
Yeah, like, you know, just if anyone hasn't seen it, basically it is just the story of A Christmas Carol, where Ebenezer Scrooge is like, I'm sure you know the term Scrooge, you know, it's sort of become in the zeitgeist of humanity. And it basically just means he isn't into the spirit of Christmas. He's basically not into the spirit of anything. No. And it's basically a story which chronicles his journey through to realizing that he should actually be kinder to people.
Embrace the spirit of Christmas.
Yeah, he embraces the spirit of Christmas, which is actually just the spirit of humanity. And I will say, it's interesting. I watched this film with a friend of mine she'd never seen Christmas Carol, and it was funny. The first thing she said was, "Oh my God, I completely forgot or didn't realize that there's humans in the Muppets films."
Yeah, occasionally.
Okay, yeah, occasionally. So. And that's the one thing that's really interesting is because Michael Caine plays this straight as an arrow. You would never think
doesn't acknowledge that there's a Muppet in the movie at any point.
Yeah, if you just completely blacked out the rest of the screen and just left Michael Caine there and just watched that, you would assume that this was an all human version.
Yeah, I mean there are some like anthropomorphized Muppets, as we've discussed previously. My two favorite characters in this are the Ghost of Christmas Present, who is basically a human. He's a guy who like is enormous and pokes his head through doors and says, "Come on in and know me better, man." That guy rules.
He's basically a precursor to Hagrid, that man.
Yeah, he is sort of a proto Hagrid, but he is a human Muppet, which is always you're playing with fire when you make the Muppets human, because you're getting into the uncanny valley there a little bit, actually. They look too lifelike. But then on the other side of that, you have Sam the Eagle as Scrooge's headmaster at school, who has some absolutely great lines.
Yeah, he has some great ones. I would say, like, just if you haven't seen it, watch it. Michael Caine is fantastic in it. Obviously, all the Muppets are great in it. Charles Dickens is great in it himself. Gonzo.
Yeah. With Rizzo the Rat as a foil.
Yeah, Rizzo is one of my favorite Muppets. Yeah, but definitely worth checking out, guys. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because if you've seen it, you've heard a million people talking about it, and if you haven't seen it, you know, what are you going to listen to? You just go and watch it. Basically, the music in it is amazing too. Just like you'll listen to the music the rest of your life. It's amazing. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to keep things in the festive Yule house. The festive wheelhouse was what I meant to say there, but
the Yule house works.
The Yule house, yeah. The festive wheelhouse here, with 1984's Gremlins by Joe Dante, who also did the sequel, and Small Soldiers 2. Have you ever seen this movie?
No, I've never seen it. I was at my auntie's house when I was about 7 or 8, and it was on. So I probably did watch it, but I just can't remember it at all.
It's a really fun movie. It's not perfect. I think nostalgia gets you a lot of the way with this one, but the creature effects are amazing. Gizmo as the
I knew Gizmo, yeah, I knew the name.
As the central Mogwai is adorable, and the actors that like play off of him. So Corey Feldman is in this movie as a he's probably like 13 or something in it. He is great. And there's the guy who plays the main character's dad is this actor called Hoyt Axton, who's basically like the shitty inventor who comes up with the terrible, terrible inventions that will never make the family any money. Although
that's somehow a real 80s trope. That's a real 80s
it is.
Trope.
It is a real 80s trope, that. But somehow they still manage to live in like this sort of palatial Hamptons suburban house, despite none of them having jobs apart from the son. But he's great.
Even the Rugrats buys into that trope.
Yeah. Like having a dad who's like a failed inventor is a textbook family film trope. I feel like I guess like Flubber is like that's Flubber. The case. Although he ends up making a really good invention.
Yeah.
But yeah, Gremlins is a great movie. It's almost a horror. I guess it is horror at points because it does get quite dark in some of the stuff that it talks about. I won't give anything away, but there are a lot of characters die, but it's kind of horror in the same way that something like, I'm trying to think what to compare it to really. The people who are dying are mainly bad guys, so you're kind of on the side of the Gremlins until the main characters come up against them. But it's great fun. It has a brilliant score. It's got some really good performances. It's a cracking Christmas movie, and the sequel is pretty good too. And that's also Joe Dante, although he didn't want to make that movie. So basically, when the I can't remember who actually put this out, but they came to him and said Gremlins was a financial success. We want you to make another one, and he said no. And then the production company said, well, what if we let you do whatever you want with it? And he said, okay. And then he just completely just went nuts with it and was like, oh, we're going to have a gremlin that's made of electricity in this one. But yeah, so Gremlins, if you haven't seen it and you're still in the mood for a Christmas movie, check it out. It's fantastic.
Okay, interesting. I will note, I just noticed there, looking at it here, Chris Columbus is the writer.
Yes. Yeah,
Chris Columbus, of course, probably most famous for directing Harry Potter 1 and 2.
Yep.
He also... Interestingly, here it says here that he is currently producing Gremlins 3.
Yeah, I don't. It's one of those like Back to the Future 4 kind of things where I wonder whether we'll ever see that.
Apparently, it's been announced. He's also being given credit for coming up with the characters for apparently a new Goonies 2.
Yeah, yeah. I hope not. If you actually go back to the Goonies, take your nostalgia glasses. Like, I liked the Goonies a lot when I was a kid. I'm just going to say that now. If you go back to that movie now, take the nostalgia glasses off and actually watch that movie. It is not a good film. It's not good. It's just, it's a kids movie, and that's fine. It's a fun kids movie. I would show it to my kids, and I enjoyed it a lot when I was a child. But there's no need for a sequel. We can make new things.
True.
We don't need it. We don't need a Goonies 2.
Yeah. Also, just talking about Chris Columbus, I've literally just went into his filmography here, and there's a whole load of films from my childhood that he directed that I didn't realize.
Yeah. Chris Columbus was on a tear in the 80s and 90s.
Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yep.
9 months. Have you seen that? Another Hugh Grant.
No, I've never seen 9 months.
Great one. Great. I saw a lot of Hugh Grant and stuff because my mom loved it. But
yeah. Also,
great little gem here. Bicentennial Man.
Oh, that movie sucks so bad. I watched that. My partner really likes that movie, and we watched it. Probably
it's got the Wee Bought a Zoo factor.
Oh my god, that movie! The balls on that movie to be as long as it is, like it's. And then he falls in love with the great granddaughter of the woman that he fell in love with because she looks exactly the same, and they never address it. They're just like, "Oh, you're basically the same as your great grandmother, who I loved." It's
basically the. It's also Hook does that too. Where,
it does.
Falls in love with the granddaughter of.
Hook has the good grace to not last 3 hours. It doesn't outstay its welcome.
Listen, that is his Spartacus. That is Chris Columbus's stamp on the world. This is who I am. I want to say before we move on from Chris Columbus here, we move on after I say this, but he's also in pre-production. He's going to direct a Five Nights at Freddy's film.
Oh, finally. I mean, who knows? That could be good. I don't know. Five Nights at Freddy's is something that has just completely passed me by in the gaming landscape. I know there's a lot of them. I know they made a lot of money.
Yeah.
Someone was always going to make a movie of that, and maybe it'll be a good horror movie. Who knows?
Who knows?
But yeah, so moving on to my second one then, and this is it's pretty similar to Gremlins. It's not at all. This is 2020's Extraction. It's a directorial debut for Sam Hargrave, and he is basically a former stuntman who did stunts on Marvel movies, Atomic Blonde, and a couple of other bits and pieces. And he's had a very similar career path to Chad Stahelski, who directed John Wick, and who was also a stuntman for Keanu Reeves in the 90s. And there's no reason why anyone would know this, but for me, my favorite kind of era of action cinema was in Hong Kong in the late 80s and early 90s with Jackie Chan and John Woo films. And the reason I like that so much is because with Jackie Chan films in particular, there was a way of shooting him that we never really saw in the West, which was basically the director saying, which sometimes actually was Jackie Chan or often was like someone like Sammo Hung, will be like, Jackie Chan is an amazing martial artist, so we're going to shoot you in a wide angle, well-lit shot, and we're just going to let your choreography and your martial arts and your stunt work carry the scene because we know you can do it. And he kind of lost that a little bit when he came to the West because it takes ages to shoot that way, and because you need to choreograph and then perform the entire scene. And it's expensive to do that. So what most Western movies do instead is they shoot everything in quite close up. They cut on the hits. They color grade everything blue and basically do their best to hide the fact that the actors can't actually fight. So that was like a lot of action cinema in Hollywood for about 20 years looked pretty much exactly the same way, with the exception of some stuff that John Woo made and a couple of other directors. But then along came Chad Stahelski and John Wick in 2014, and they said, hey, Keanu Reeves is going to spend 6 months learning how to reload a gun and shoot it and look like a badass. And John Wick was the result, and it's very, very heavily influenced by that.
Should I watch it?
Have you not seen John Wick?
No.
Oh, you should see John Wick. John Wick is a very good movie. Like it's
I'm gonna look out for that. I need to watch it.
But it's these like kind of like loving wide angle long takes that just show you Keanu Reeves, show you the work Keanu Reeves and the other actors have done to learn the choreography and make it look great. And 2020's Extraction is basically the same kind of thing. It's Chris Hemsworth plays a mercenary who is hired to rescue the kidnapped son of a crime lord in India. I think it's in Mumbai, but I can't actually remember, to be honest. But as luck would have it, there's a betrayal, and Chris Hemsworth is left alone in Mumbai with this child, with every gangster and corrupt cop in the city out to get him. And it has these amazing action set pieces. I think the story it's telling of, this hardened mercenary who has to soften a bit to look after this child, and we find out through the film why he has these hard edges around children. That's quite, it's quite stereotypical. It's not telling a new story, but the performances are good and the action set pieces are amazing. They're well worth checking out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think this is a genre of cinema which you're very into.
Yeah.
Action films, basically. And it is kind of a genre of cinema which I have let pass me by, as you can see by the fact that I haven't seen John Wick. Like, I am aware that the John Wick films are really, really popular and they are really, really good, apparently. And they're very gritty and like sort of, I don't know how you would describe it, like, but visceral.
Very violent.
Yeah, very violent. I'm aware of that, and I've always intended to watch them, but for some reason, I don't know why, this is a genre that when I'm thinking about I think action and comedy are in the same spot in people's head, when you sort of really want to just watch a film and just really enjoy it and not really think too hard about it. My head would always tip towards a comedy. I think your head would always tip towards an action film.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I mean, I think also with a lot of action movies, and I'm not saying this to like talk shit about superhero movies, but a lot of them look very, very similar. So a lot of the Marvel movies, they do feel generic. Probably isn't the right word, because some of them are really good and generic implies a kind of average quality to them. But I'm a sucker for nice photography, things being presented in a nice way, and I do value story and acting as well. But if something looks nice, that is enough to get me on board. And John Wick, and to a lesser extent Extraction, totally tick the box for that. So John Wick, the first one, is brilliantly presented. It's a really simple story and it looks amazing. Extraction doesn't look quite as nice because it's got that thing that some movies that's set in the Middle East or India do, where they kind of just color grade everything yellow so that your mind interprets it as hot, which is kind of lazy. But the action set pieces are amazing. So I think your enjoyment of the movie will hinge on how much leeway you're prepared to give a movie when the scenes in between the action set pieces are just kind of spinning plates until we get to the next one. But when your action set pieces include Chris Hemsworth absolutely annihilating a group of Indian street children, you're onto something good. So this is worth checking out if you're in the mood for that.
Could we just like, so people don't hate you too much, it wouldn't matter what race those children are, as long as children are getting killed, you're happy.
No, it's not a racial thing. It's just Chris Hemsworth obliterating a group of children by like kicking them into cars and stuff. Listen, those children started the fight, all right? I'm on Chris Hemsworth's side on this. But yeah, well worth checking out if you haven't already. It's on Netflix, I think. So hopefully it's on international versions of Netflix too.
Yeah, I will say as well, like I'm really interested in that idea of you talking about like the films which sort of let the action speak for itself, and the stunt choreography is designed in a way where it's one long sort of wide take which lets the actors go to work. I'm interested in how that affects the casting of the films, because like I was watching all the special features to Tenet, which I mentioned last week that I watched, and like there was a big aspect of that. They're talking about John David Washington, who apparently used to be a professional football player. Okay. And because of that, they knew when they cast him, he would have the physicality necessary to do these things. And they did that, and they for weeks practiced the fight scenes. So it wasn't just like, okay, we'll shoot this here. Can you punch? Okay, that's done. We'll do it from around this way now. You kick. Okay, that's it. It was very much learning it. And there was a particular scene where, not trying to be as spoiler-free as possible here, he was fighting someone who wasn't necessarily moving in the same direction of time as him. Right? And he needed to learn the fight a load of different ways. And there was a really cool moment. And like this actually gives me a bit of... we've talked about Chris Nolan a lot. But obviously when you talk about Chris Nolan film, you have to talk about Chris Nolan. He gives a lot of faith to the people he puts in charge of the departments that he has. Like he wants people to have real ownership over their part of the film. But whenever he was first explaining to the stunt coordinator the film, it's absolutely hilarious, because like there's a guy going back in time fighting a guy going forward in time, basically, okay, nice. Right? And like
that sounds hard to choreograph, to be honest.
Yeah. So but Chris Nolan said, right, so this is what I think you should do. This is what he said to the stunt coordinator on the first day. He goes, I think you should like choreograph a scene, film it the whole way through, then watch it backwards, and then get one of the guys to learn it backwards fully, right? So you learn it backwards, and then you get another guy to come in and fight against that guy who's doing the other thing backwards, and then you film that, and then you play the whole thing in reverse, and there's your fight scene. That's what Chris Nolan said to him on the first day, and he's just like, say that again.
Right? Yeah, that seems like a nightmare to choreograph, frankly.
It was so good. Like, okay, so yeah, I'm. This is another film which I need to add to my watch list, because this Extraction sounds great.
Check it out. But yeah, okay, so we're on to our last two now. So do you want to head us off?
Yeah. So I'm sure most people will check this out at some point. If you've got Disney Plus, I think you probably definitely will, because there's not very many times that they release full sort of theatrical releases that would usually be theatrical releases onto Disney Plus, and that is Pixar's Soul.
Yes, I've had a lot of people talking about this week. Yeah,
it's by Pete Docter, who you might recognize from Up, Inside Out, and Monsters Inc. So he does a lot of, maybe Up is the exception, but he does a lot of the conceptual sort of existential ones, where like the idea of monster in the closet for Monsters Inc., the idea of like, how you form your personality and your feelings in Inside Out.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Inside Out was the feelings, whereas now this one is sort of thinking more about your personality. And like sort of before you come to Earth, your soul creating your personality and then coming to Earth. And there's a whole really interesting conceptual discussion throughout the film, whether or not, you're preordained with your talents and preordained with your purpose in life before you're born. And that's a whole discussion. I'm not like, say where the film concludes on that point. Doesn't mean like just because the film concludes there doesn't mean you have to conclude the same point, but that's the discussion. But basically, it's a story about a character called Joe, who's played by Jamie Foxx, and the setup of the film is that Joe is a teacher of music who feels like his life has sort of passed him by a bit. He always wanted to be a professional jazz blues musician, and he never really got his full chance in his eyes. Whereas then he gets given a permanent job in the school, and it makes him think, should I pursue my teaching career, or should I just go full bore and pursue my other career in the music world? Now he's lucky because a former student of his actually contacts him that same day, as fate would have it, and says, here, Dorothea Williams, who is a really, really big blues artist, says, hey, Dorothea Williams is down here. Come on down, Joe. We need a piano player. Show her what you got. And he does. It goes well. He gets the job. And then while he's running away back home or whatever, celebrating, he falls down a manhole and dies.
And that's the end of the movie.
That's the end. After 5 minutes, that's the end. So that's the setup to the movie. He then goes to the great world before. Well, there's a really cool part where he's supposed to travel into the great beyond, but he sort of refuses to do so. And then there's like a character called Terry, who's played by Rachel House, who is the grandma, I believe, from Moana. And and Terry is like the accountant who counts how many souls, and the whole time Terry's going around going, there's one missing. It's really good. But yeah, so basically, while in the before world or after world, whatever you want to call it, he gets given the task of mentoring a character called 22, Soul number 22.
Okay.
And that is played by Tina Fey. And basically this Soul number 22 has been mentored by all the greats of the past, Abraham Lincoln, like Gandhi. They've all tried to mentor this soul to no avail.
Okay, nice.
So we could all kind of see where that's going. But big shout out before we sort of get into a bit more. Big shout out to Graham Norton.
Yeah, I couldn't believe when you told me that he was in this. I do not remember him being in anything. He was in the Eurovision saga of... No, hold on. The Story of Fire saga, or whatever it was called this year. But he was playing himself. I haven't seen him in anything else dramatically, I don't think.
Yeah, well, dramatically, no. He is in Father Ted, which is great. He's a priest in Father Ted. Father Tony. But so I would check that out in Father Ted. But basically, he plays like a hippie pirate guy who like sort of can commune with the afterlife through getting in the zone by twirling his sign outside a shop. And it's... Yeah, it's a fun Pixar film that hits you right at the right chord. Like we've talked, Konrad and I have talked before about the idea that Pixar films know exactly which buttons to press to get them. They're like the X Factor of films, much better quality than X Factor though. But they know which buttons to press, and they've got the formula. They've got the formula there. They know what to do. I will say though, when I watched Coco, when I watched Onward. Now, Onward, I've mentioned before how that is a film that was created to make me cry. Just me. I think they had me when they were thinking of me.
Yeah, they modelled it on your emotional response.
Yeah, they modelled it on me. It's perfectly analogous to my life, although I'm not a wizard. Also...
that's what a wizard would say.
Yeah, it's true. Maybe I just haven't found the staff my dad left me yet. But basically... all these films, I always kind of can predict where the formula is going to take us. In this one, I'm going to say I didn't actually predict. I predicted wrong. So I'm interested to see what you think of this film if you watch it, and I'll tell you what I predicted. And I think what I predict is going to make 100% sense to you. It's just the way that the film went is slightly different to what I thought. But anyway,
No, I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I've heard a lot of really positive things about it. And to be honest, talking about Pixar movies or Disney Pixar movies following a formula, I think there's a risk that makes it sound like they're rote and really formulaic. But I mean, every single one of them has and particularly is it Pete Docter? You said the guy's name is. So like Up and Inside Out and Monsters Inc. and now this is a pretty fucking good list of movies, to be honest. That's some heavy hitters in the Pixar canon there that he's contributed or directly created. And I think the fact that they're all able to hit that kind of emotional formula to get that response from people, like Up in particular for me, first 15 minutes of Up, I will cry my eyes out. And then later on when when he's looking back through the photo album and finds a certain something that, and it's easy to say, they've got this formula and they follow it, and they, to a certain extent they do, but there's so much stuff that tries to do it and fails that I think Pixar deserve all the credit in the world for how consistently they are able to nail what they're going for.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but I will just say I forgot. It's also co-directed by Kemp Powers, who it's his first experience of directing. He's been a writer before on various things, but he wrote it with Pete Docter, and I think that this is something Pixar does very well. And you could say that this is very corporation, Disney corporation attempting to be more PC. I'm sure you could say that. But at the end of the day, they brought a black voice into the creation of this film that is very much around the black blues jazz world. Yeah. And they did the same thing with Coco in terms of bringing in the Hispanic voice. So I think that's...
It's better to have that than not, I would say.
It makes it more authentic in small ways that we probably, as people who are outside of that culture, don't realize.
Yeah, like, I think it's easy to kind of, I don't know, like I can see some people like rolling their eyes with that kind of stuff and being like, well, does it really make a difference? Like, well, I mean, it's better to have it.
Yeah.
It's you're not going to lose anything by having, the voice of people who are perhaps closer related to that to the scene it's depicting than others.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm all for it, to be honest with you. Right, what's your last one?
So my last one is 3 movies. We're not going to spend too long on it because these are some of my favorite movies ever, and I'm sure we will talk about these over and over again. We can
do a special on just them, to be honest.
Yeah. And that is Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy. I watched all 3 of these on Christmas Day. So that was a solid 9 hours of films that I watched on Christmas Day. I love these movies. I think their photography is fantastic. The performances are fantastic. And the last, talking about things that make you cry, the last sort of half hour of Return of the King, where it's just ending after ending after ending, and every single one of them is just this catharsis of this release after 9 hours of watching these characters struggle and finally make it. It just has me crying like a baby every time. But I love the Lord of the Rings films so much.
For Frodo. Basically, the other day, for some reason, I don't know why, I was doing my best George V impression. I was like, but I was doing
George V, as in who the hell's George V?
Isn't he, Colin Firth's character in?
Okay. Actually, the real George V. Right. Okay. I thought this was like a celebrity I didn't know.
Well, he's more like George V or like just a radio producer from back then. Because the other day, for some reason, I was doing this George V voice. Hello, and random...
talking through like a crackly microphone, like hello, everyone.
But when you're just doing a voice, you need to reach for something to actually say. So for some reason, I just reached for Aragorn's speech, and I was like, "It is not this day. This day we fight for Frodo.
A day of Chatterfield."
we should do a dub of that whole film.
I cannot carry the ring for you, Frodo, but I can carry you. I'm doing a really nasal thing to try and get the radio effect.
Oh no, you don't. It sounded great. It really sounds
great.
Good.
Okay, well maybe that'll be a bonus episode. But we'll do that once we get to episode 100. We'll do a full episode just on the Lord of the Rings, and we'll do the whole thing in George V voices.
Yeah. We have to start though. It is not this day. This is the day we fight. No offense to anyone. That is actually an impression of George V. Like my brother had a stutter. I'm very, I'm on board with that call.
Dodge out of the way of that bullet, nice and quick.
My brother actually did have a stutter actually, and he used to have a chart on the fridge when he was like 4 or 5. That it was really strange. It was like a stick figure that had really like straight lines. That was called Mr. Smooth, and whenever he was like speaking very well, that would be the part that was turned out to the house. But whenever he was stuttering a lot, you would turn it around and it would be all wavy lines, and you called him Mr. Bumpy. Now, obviously, the speech therapist wanted us to do that. It's thinking about that now. I'm like, is that helpful? That like 90s speech therapy? I don't know how much it's come on since then, but that's basically
that's interesting though.
Yeah. Anyway, there we go.
But Lord of the Rings, amazing. I don't think we need to say that much about these. They are. I think this is a perfect trilogy. I also watched recently, having never seen them before, the entire Harry Potter series of movies, and I'm not talking shit about them. Some of those are good movies, but there's a lot. The third one's really good. The last 2 are pretty good as well. There are some bad ones in there though, and I think when you look at how well they land the plane on Lord of the Rings, and then you compare it to the kind of end of Harry Potter, it's night and day. I think they're just this could have got, and you can look at The Hobbit as well. Like, look at how badly this could have gone, and then you look at this, and it is literally a miracle that these films turned out as well as they did. And I cherish them so much. I think they are probably the best fantasy films I've ever seen. And I think it'll take some beating to knock them off the top spot.
I think you're right there, and Jesus, come on, like these are just amazing. Like I've seen them multiple times. I think me, wee bought a zoo fan. I think that the stuff in The Hobbit at the start is definitely the best of the whole series. Definite wee bought a zoo factor happening there.
Yeah. Do you not think there's a wee bought a zoo factor in the opening in the Shire in Fellowship of the Ring? Or are you talking about The Hobbit? I thought you were talking about the opening of The Hobbit. Okay,
no,
sure.
The Hobbit, no. I'm not sure how I feel about the Hobbit films. I lean towards not liking them. If I'm honest with you.
Strong we bought a zoo factor in the opening in the Shire.
Yeah. Also, a little bit when we get to Rohan. not as much as the Shire
and Rivendell as well. Like the elves have a strong We Bought a Zoo energy.
I will say as well, it's mental that the Return of the King landed the ending so well because they had about 12 endings.
Yeah, I mean, everyone always makes that joke, but when you have that, when all of your endings are that good, like put them all in. I don't give a shit. Literally, like it's like, okay, Sam and Frodo crying on the rock as they're about to die. I'm already gone at that point.
Yeah.
And then the Eagles come and save them, and it's Frodo waking up and everyone coming hugging him in bed, and I go again. And then it cuts to the fucking like the procession on the top of Minas Tirith, where like the ceremony rather, they're crowning Aragorn king, and they do the "My friends, you bow to no one" thing, and everyone bows, and I go again, and then they do going to fucking Valinor at the end, and it's like, I just can't. Like, I was a mess by the end of it. I always am. But
what about the little? What about the Hobbit who's like?
Yeah, the frowny Hobbit. A great callback to the sort of first 20 minutes of the first movie.
I know, calling back to things from 2 films before.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. They're perfect. I love these movies so much.
Had your partner seen these films before?
I think she had, but she'd never seen them with someone as enthusiastic about them as me. So I was like sitting there, being like, "A wizard is never like Master Frodo," and like basically like voicing along all the lines. And
he arrives precisely when he means to.
Yeah, she was just sitting there like, "You're a complete nerd. I don't know why I'm with you," which I sympathise, frankly. But yeah, so there we go. Lord of the Rings, watch it. I think so. What we're going to do now, folks, is we're going to go into a brief section where we talk about stuff that we're looking forward to, that's coming up in the near future. Mm-hmm. I'm conscious that we're at an hour 15 now, so we'll rattle through these as quickly as possible, so as not to keep you too long. So, Anthony, have you got anything on the radar?
When you say coming up soon, it doesn't mean they're being released soon. It's just the things that we're thinking.
Just stuff that's caught your eye.
So basically, I'm going to watch John Wick because of what we've talked about today. I'm sure that's on some sort of streaming service. And then I've got 2 films that I really have wanted to watch. One of them I haven't seen before, and one of them I have seen a long time ago. And that is, I'm also going to watch, hopefully for our next diary episode, I'll have had this watched. And that'll be Theory of Everything with
Eddie Redmayne.
Eddie Redmayne, yeah. Strange, Eddie Redmayne actually was around for years, and then Les Mis came out. I saw it. I was like, "Oh, this is a new actor." And then I look back; he's been acting for like 15 years before that. Like, it's weird.
He's a lot older than he looks.
Yeah. I just missed his first like 15 years of his career. So Eddie Redmayne, Theory of Everything, John Wick, and then the last one that I'm going to watch, which is going to be a slog. I know it's 2 hours 45 minutes long, but I haven't seen it since the cinema, and that is The Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
I've never seen that. It's
on Netflix.
I might try watching that. It's not a movie that the concept doesn't immediately grab me.
Well, it's the type of film we were talking about last week, where like it's like a fake biopic. Yeah, like Big Fish or like Forrest Gump. That's what. Is it kind of like using Benjamin Button to view the world around him, or is it more about his character and his relationships? It's about his character. Okay, I should watch it. I've heard good things. So that's what I'm going to watch. Okay, that's a good list, a solid list. I think I've also added one to mine based on these discussions. So I need to watch the second season of The Mandalorian. So I was going to subscribe to Disney Plus anyway, but I think I'll check out Soul while I'm there because that sounds great. You have sold me on Tenet. I think I'm gonna try and catch that. Well, you said that when it comes to an action film, if it looks good, that's a certain amount of the way there. Yeah. Tenet is a film which looks amazing. It looks beautiful. It really does. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing you can never accuse Nolan of not making his films look amazing. Like he can do a set piece, even when his other stuff is struggling. Like just go into it knowing that it is very convoluted. And then and then hopefully you'll sort of get through it without hating it. I know when I watched it, I was like, this is very convoluted, very Nolan. And Konrad could go either way on it. That's all I'll say. We'll see. Yeah, like, you'll not hate it. You don't hate any Nolan film. No, there's none that I wouldn't watch. There's some that I love and some that I think are just okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so this is one I don't think that you had heard of prior to me mentioning it to you, and it's I mean, why would you? Because it's kind of it's a Danish release, but it's Another Round, which is a Thomas Vinterberg movie starring Mads Mikkelsen that's come out this year. Basically, it's about a group of teachers who discover a theory that if you maintain a certain blood alcohol level, life is supposed to be easier. So it's basically like a bunch of teachers descending into alcoholism, and it's a very dark comedy. It's not out in this country yet, in this country being the UK, so I need to keep an eye out to see when that releases, but I have got my eye on that. Okay. And the last one for me, it's coming to UK Netflix and hopefully other Netflix on January the 1st, and that is 2012's Dread, which is a fucking cool movie. It was a complete failure financially. Pete Travis, I don't think he made much else before or after this. I think he mainly did television. Mm-hmm. It's got Carl Urban as Judge Dredd. It came out the same year as The Raid. Did you ever see that movie?
No.
So it was one of those weird Deep Impact Armageddon moments where two movies with very similar concepts released within 6 months of each other, where basically cops go into a tower block to get, in this case, it's to investigate a crime and end up kicking the hornet's nest and having to get out alive. It is a phenomenal movie. If you're in the mood for a really cool kind of dystopian sci-fi action movie, 2012's Dread is the place to be.
Awesome. I will watch that.
Cool. Okay. Well, I think that pretty much does us for this week. We've gone a svelte hour 22, which I think is hopefully our listeners are appreciative of that without us rambling on too much.
Yeah. And
really, there's only one thing left for us to establish here at the end of this episode, and that is simply, Anthony, what's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie is Apollo 13.
Amazing.
What's your favorite movie, Conrad?
My favorite movie is The Fellowship of the Ring. Perfect choices, and I'm going to say thank you to Nancy Wyatt and Jared Iscariot for the use of their theme song. We've got links to their stuff down in the description below. Check that out. And yeah, thank you for listening. Catch us next week. Share the show with your friends. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. And we will see you. I said will then. I actually meant we will see you in a week's time.
And cut.